Hello everyone, welcome back to Lunch400. This is your new professor, Dr. Evil Bionic Panda. We'll be picking up right where your last professor left off. And I see no reason to delay. So, let's get right into it. This week's lecture is one that I believe is very near and dear to myself and very important for all of you shitheads. We'll be talking about evil layer design and your villain persona, of course, as the two are intimately intertwined. Now, it's important to remember one very big thing when we talk about the design of an evil layer. That is that anyone can be a villain. Villains do not fit into one box. We're a very inclusive group. There's no right or wrong villain. There's no villain that is the model. Any villain is perfectly accepted in our nice group. Now, with that being said, let's look at a few examples. Now, here's one villain layer. Here's another villain layer. We look at all of these and we see there's tremendous diversity. We have an old amusement park. We have a restaurant. We have a castle. We have a mansion. Villain layers, evil layers, come in many shapes, sizes, colors, forms. And there is no right or wrong layer, just as there is no right or wrong villain. You should know that anything can be your evil layer, but it must satisfy three necessary elements. While not all evil layers are the same, they do share some design elements, those being a sinister style, strong security, and strategic use of space. We will be going into depth of each of these so that you all get a better understanding of what is meant with these. Now, the first, sinister style. Let's take a look at an example. This villain, Mr. Fazbear, has this layer. Now, the motif of the layer matches that of the villain, an animatronic who lives in a children's restaurant. If we look at the interior, the theming is kept consistent. We see dining chairs, we see that nice restaurant flooring. We can even go and expand it into seeing posters, an office in the back where a manager would sit, or a security guard. But the principal idea here is that the design is kept consistent throughout the layer, and that design is reflected on the villain's design. The two are intertwined. You can't have the broken down amusement park evil layer without the Joker. They just don't fit. The two must be kept consistent. Now, it should be said that in terms of the design, the goons that you may keep around your layer are equally as important and should keep that consistent design as well. Following with the previous example, we know that the main villain, Freddy, has multiple goons, much of which are also animatronics. You see, the goon outfits, or the choice of your goons entirely, need to maintain your theming as well. Now, of course, it should be said as a side note, not all villains have goons, but the best villains usually do. Now, let's continue. A strong security. How does one defend your layer from somebody trying to break in? Yes. In many instances, you may establish some traps, lasers, tripwires, and these as well come in many forms. You can have, like I said, something abiotic, a laser. You could use the shark pit, a classic. Somebody falls in, eaten by sharks. Many cases, Your goons yourself are your security. They patrol, they check for any errors or discrepancies in your layer, and they will defend it. But a nice blend of the two is usually what you would want. Traps and your goons. Finally, we're going to talk about the sinister space. By this, I mean, what do you use your layer for? Of course, it's a home base for all of your mischief and bad deeds. But, of course, there are other things you can do with it. You can establish a torture chamber in order to kidnap and mutilate anyone you may want. You could establish a dungeon to keep others. Maybe you're keeping hostages. You could even use it for something as simple as cooking in the kitchen. You know, the limits are non-existent in this. But you should remember the previous design aspects in that the theming should be consistent. Right? Obviously, we have some medieval group for the dungeon and the torture chamber, and perhaps a hellish demon-like layer for the other. But the theming still needs to be fairly consistent, even though the activities may differ within the layer. Let's look at an example. Put it all together. We're going to look at the layer of my organization, OSO. Here is the entrance, or one of the layer. Now, already we can see there's a certain theme going on, a burrow. I know, a little stereotypical for an anthropomorphic animal like myself, but the theming is there. We already see the first defense, the strong security, a deterrent, a sign that tells others there is no layer. Of course, that may or may not be a ruse. Some other security that we use. Again, let's make sure to keep consistent with the theme. We have more burrows. These are what we call the trap holes. They're endless and they fall forever. Anybody who wants to enter may accidentally find one of these, another deterrent. Of course, we also have the goons running around. We have our scorpion men, as we like to call them, as they patrol, and they act as another set of security. And then what do we use our layer for? What are those uses? Well, inside, keeping, again, in mind with theming, we have a pillory room where we can tie people up, mutilate them, cut their nuts off, and the like. Or we could even have something as simple as a nice flamingo and bathtub room to do with whatever you would like in there. But again, the theming remains consistent. I, as a panda, of course, this should not be explanatory. This should not need it to be explained at all. Your assignment for this lecture, which might I remind you will be ranked, is to design your own evil layer, which, remembering the theming, should be consistent with your villain and or villain persona that you will design. You need to incorporate and explain all three elements of the three S's. Now, you need to include images of the layer, exterior and interior, what traps, what goons, what rooms you may have. And then you need to explain why you designed it, why you chose those things. Again, this will be ranked. More details about the assignment and the point breakdown can be found